Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transu, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your co-host for today's show. We're on Lunch and Learn, episode number 9, I believe this one is, with none other than Lucy McKellar, our Executive Director of AFDNP, which is the Association of Functional Diagnostic Nutrition Professionals. Lucy, welcome back to another Lunch and Learn. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
I can hardly remember a time I was better. Thank you for asking. I used to use that line a lot, and I realized I stopped doing that as much during summer open house. So there must have been something there psychologically that got me.
So, I mean, you were doing a lot. You were doing a lot.
Yeah,
So,
if you guys haven't been around the last month, hopefully you have. I mean, I hope you guys actually got to consume the content and enjoy it. We just did a whole month in June called Summer Open House. We've actually, technically, this is our third annual Summer Open House, and yet somehow we just keep trying to add more each year. So I think we did like 44 live events this year in the month of June. Almost all of them were Monday through Friday. So it was a little crazy, but it's very fun. I think when the audience there is there and engaging, it's a different level of excitement, and it makes you be able to handle a bit more, but I'm glad it's over. And then we're back to normal podcast scheduling. And speaking of podcast scheduling, there's some wonderful people who have come on this podcast, and I got to shout them out really quick. I want to shout out the folks at North Star Grounding. So this is John Hegarty and his brother, and these guys have created grounding products like pillowcases and sheets that you can sleep on, and they actually help ground you while you sleep. If you're wondering what that is, that's like earthing, right? Grounding, earthing. You actually get to do that while you sleep. So this is something that my wife Maddie and I have now been using. I don't know, it's got to be at least a month now. And I've said this every single time. The first 2 nights of using this, my readiness score on my Aura ring went up to the highest it had been in like a month and a half, 2 months, which I thought was crazy. And, as I've used it longer, like I thought it was going to be wildly profound in the beginning, considering the readiness score went up. I always want to be realistic about stuff. I think it's pretty cool. I definitely would not change this. This will always be a staple in my life now, but you have to be doing the other stuff. You can't go exercise for 7 hours that day and expect your grounding sheet to just somehow fix you. I don't think that's a claim that they're making, and I don't think that's a realistic expectation. But I went from, admittedly, because I'm in the health space, but this was still a struggle for me. I probably went from grounding maybe 10 minutes a week, 20 minutes a week on average, and that's if I'm lucky, to now I'm grounding basically 7.5, 8 hours a day. And I'm just like wondering, wow, how much long-term benefit is that going to have? And all of the stuff that you buy from them, it goes to fund their nonprofit. Like as if these guys couldn't get cooler. It goes to fund their nonprofit, and their nonprofit allows you to order free videos from these cancer survivors who have been through various cancers and healed it naturally. And then they will actually make a personalized video for the person in your life who you would like to send the message to. And I think this is just so important because well, I had a family member that passed away from cancer, and I remember when she was first diagnosed. Of course, you want to tell them everything and share everything that you know with them, but it almost feels inappropriate. Cancer is a very serious thing, and it's not that it wasn't received well, but she never did anything with it, and unfortunately, she did pass away. And I keep thinking, I'm like, what if I could have gotten her a gift where someone was actually saying, "Hey, Aunt," I don't want to say her name for various reasons, but hey, Aunt XYZ, I went through this as well. I understand you're scared, all that stuff. Like, I feel like that just might connect in such a better way. So you can ground while you sleep. And these guys are using this to support their nonprofit, which is like the best thing in the world. So sorry for these long ads with them. They actually did not ask me to do this. We're not being paid to do this. Of course, if you do use our code, yes, we get a kickback, but they don't know that I'm doing this all the time. I just absolutely love what they're doing. So northstargrounding.com and then code HDP, all caps, HDP15 at checkout for 15% off. So Lucy, thank you for working with me there. But I think last time, even when we talked, you were like, that's worthy of putting a few minutes into. Those guys are
oh
awesome.
yeah, 100%. And actually, I'd actually forgotten since the last time like we did this that you were talking about these guys, because I haven't been sleeping great like recently. So anything I can get to improve my sleep, as we know, sleep is super important. So I'm probably going to look into buying one of those.
That'd be awesome. Really cool. So, and then they have testers with it, so you can make sure you're doing everything right. It's just they have such great hearts. So, if you guys haven't seen their episode, go check out why you should sleep grounded on the Health Detective podcast. Anyway, let's get into this today. What we are doing for Lunch and Learn number 9, we're following up from number 8. We always try to do these somewhat sequentially. And last time we were talking about our stress and hormones profile test. So we were talking about what we're looking at, why it's even important, why this is a foundational test at FDN. And we won't review that part too much today because you could still get a lot from this even if you didn't get to watch that one. And then, of course, once you're done this, you could always go back and watch that one. What we're going to do is actually do a live screen share from some of our results. So if you're listening on audio, it's not that you can't get the information that you need today. We always try to make these episodes with the audio only audience in mind. But I would highly recommend, if you could, it's probably beneficial to check out the YouTube version afterwards. So if you're listening on audio, I will put the link in the show notes right at the top for you where you can find the YouTube video of this so that you can see what we're actually sharing. So the first thing we wanted to do here, and let me turn off the little blue light filter so that you guys don't get that and it screws you up. What I'm going to do is share my screen, and we're going to go over the stages of HPA axis dysfunction first. Just quick review, because we've done this before on Lunch and Learns. And so just making sure, Lucy, you can see the thing clearly enough.
I got it. Yeah, I can see.
All right, perfect. So I'll cover like the first two, and then I'll let you cover the last two. Maybe that's the easiest way to do it. Real simple. Again, not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we want you guys to be remembering this chart, and we might refer back to it when you're looking at the results, the test results that Lucy and I are going to share with you. So we're sharing our personal test results today. So that first phase, if you'll call it that, is normal. You can see that right on the bottom there. It says normal. It also has the word adaptation. It's bright green. And what that means is we're in homeostasis, right? The body is not meant to deal with no stress. In fact, that's probably a bad thing. We actually know, this is total side note, but really fascinating. We know that the Buddhist monks who meditate like for decades of their life, they actually have too low of a stress response when they are actually exposed to extreme stimuli. Like they almost can't produce the same fight or flight thing, which at certain times could obviously be beneficial, but it's quite weird that we can change our physiology to that degree if we do this long enough. So we're supposed to deal with some stress. We are supposed to be able to adapt to, a little stress here, a little stress there. That's how we got to where we're at in our human development. I mean, I know our modern world like sucks with certain things health-wise, but think about what we're actually able to deal with right now. I mean, I'm using a blue lit screen. I'm under artificial light. I won't do that all day, but I'm still alive, thank God. I'm overall in great health as far as I know. That's a blessing, right? So we can deal with some of this and adapt. That's where most people that are watching this or join FDN or become clients are not. If they were in adaptation phase, they probably have no interest in this whatsoever. You know what I mean? At best, they might respect holistic health, but that's about it.
Right.
Acute phase. So the acute phase is when we're still able to keep up with the excess stress that we're now exposing our body to. So this is not just little stress here, there, and we go kind of up and down, but we're overall in homeostasis. This means the body is now in a place where it does not want to be, and it shouldn't be long term. However, the body is designed brilliantly. And it says, okay, no. We're ready to handle some excess stress for some period of time. So this is what we'll do. We'll turn up the hormones. We'll turn up the cortisol. We'll pump out extra here because we know this won't be forever. But that's the problem for a lot of us in today's world. It ends up being forever, but the body doesn't know that, right? And so it pumps up everything. And this is like a phase where, if you were able to get through your college days, if you were able to get through your college days and you're doing the, 4 hours, 5 hours of sleep, you drank all night, you go to work the next day, you took some afternoon classes, and then you did the same thing again. And yes, obviously you don't feel perfect, but you're able to handle that without like literally like dying or, being hospitalized or throwing up everywhere just because you feel so terrible, not just because of excess alcohol. then you're probably we're in an acute phase, because that's excess stress, but you could handle it, right? You almost feel kind of wired and tired, but you can keep pushing. So if you did not feel like you had any resilience like your fellow college goers had at the time, you might have already been past this type of phase. You might not have had that same vital reserve at that point. So acute, you do see people coming to FDN clients, or FDN practitioners, I should say, or the FDN program with this sometimes. Actually, ironically, Lucy was one of those people, but I would say this is the minority. And that's only because most of the people that are dealing with this, myself included at one point, we just think we're superhuman. We think we can just push this through forever until we can't. And that leads to the next two phases, which Lucy can talk about.
So compensatory is pretty much what it sounds like. It is your body compensating for, being in the high, pumping out the high amounts of stress hormones, essentially, for that prolonged period of time. This is the point where your body just can't do it anymore. It's not able to pump out the hormones that it once was giving you. And this is when you're probably most likely starting to really feel the effects of that. Things aren't what they were. Perhaps you're having to self-medicate. Maybe you're relying on caffeine. It can be something as simple as relying on caffeine to get you through the day. You're having, you've got to have your morning coffee. You can't function. You're getting those like 2 p.m. slumps. Things just aren't what they were. Perhaps you're putting on weight. I've mentioned kind of, that peak time at college when you're kind of go, go, go. A lot of us, we get out of college, maybe even after the first couple of years of being in a full-time job, you're starting to notice that difference. A lot of people will put that down to aging. Some of us don't really have that option because we realize how excessive the symptoms we're dealing with are. And some of us are just a bit more in tune with our body, and we're recognizing that things aren't quite right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we don't deal with everything that's going on at that point, the slump is going to continue. Your body is going to continue to not be able to produce the hormones that you need to produce. If you're not making changes, eating better, addressing like whatever is going on internally, getting better sleep, your body is going to keep trying to put out the amount of hormones it feels that you need to compensate, but it's not going to be able to. And things are going to keep sliding down and down until we get into the very last phase, essentially collapse, exhaustion. This is when your body just cannot keep going on like this anymore. Thankfully, we don't get a lot of people in this phase. A lot of people will come to us before in the compensatory phase. So I don't know. Have you seen this phase very often?
That's very interesting that you said that, because that just probably shows the different demographics that people attract. Like I was actually surprised when you said that for a second, because I have found the majority, like 80+% of the people I've ever tested, were in this exhaustive phase. Maybe not extreme, maybe like a few numbers were different and they would have been
Right.
in the compensatory. But no, I found this to be the case with a lot of people,
All
including my
right.
two friends who went through FDN and my wife Maddie when she went through.
Well, there you go then.
Yeah.
I
So
think that just shows you like the amount of different people that we attract. So
yeah.
in the people that came to me were mostly in compensatory. Thank goodness they weren't quite at the exhaustion phase yet. But I do have some theories as to why that is. So
The other thing, I apologize for not mentioning this. This is one key thing that you guys should take away before we go to the test results here. And Lucy, I'm not sure if you want to share yours first. That's fine. You guys will see on the left over there, it says cortisol sum. So that's a key factor in helping to figure out which phase someone's in. Now, if you're wondering, well, wait a second, Ev, that doesn't make sense. Adaptation and compensatory, they're the same cortisol sum. That's the part we'll explain a little bit more on the test results, but just something to keep in mind, that the phase is highly correlated with the cortisol sum, except for adaptation and compensatory. And we'll explain to you how to figure out the difference here, because on paperwork, it could look very similar. So would you like to share yours first?
I would, and I have a great example of that. So
Okay, I will stop sharing here, and then, oops, one sec. You should be able to go.
perfect. Thank you. I will get that. Also, shout out to Marilyn for coming to Summer Open House. She said it was amazing.
Yeah, Marilyn, I put in the chat, I'm making sure you got the replays. We did end up doing those. So if you didn't get them, let me know and I'll send you the link. It's free.
Oh, no, I don't want to share a tab. I want to share my test comparison worksheet. All right. Can you see this?
Yes, I think I just have to bring it in for you. Sorry about that. Here you go.
You got it?
A little small, but my screen's also diluted a bit. So maybe if we zoomed in just a few points, that'd be good.
Am I able to zoom in?
If you hold down the control button and zoom in on your mouse, like scroll on your mouse, I'm sorry, it should zoom.
Oh,
There you
there
go.
we go. How's that?
It's perfect. That's better.
Okay, perfect. All right. Okay, so this is a test comparison worksheet. Unfortunately, the previous, so you can see here, we use this literally, it's exactly what it sounds like, to compare ourselves and our clients, our previous tests to our latest ones. And obviously you can see you can go all the way up to 4 tests on here. So this test 1 was done in 2022. And then my most recent was April of this year. So yeah, let's go through this. So with cortisol, that's our major stress hormone. We test that morning, noon, afternoon, and night. Now you can see here that my morning cortisol was a 6.5. So at FDN, we like to keep this between a 2.7 and a 4.5. You can see here that we have our FDN preferred range here. So these are the ranges that we want our clients to be in. This is optimal health. We've mentioned this on previous podcasts, the difference between our test results and like conventional test results. Conventional test results are, I think it's 95% of the median of the 95% of people that take them, which is why those often we hear that, you feel like crap, you go to the doctor and they tell you everything is fine. It's because the majority, unfortunately, of the people that taking those tests are not in great health. So these test results have been worked out based on optimal health. So you can see here, I was absolutely not in optimal health for my morning cortisol. I was a 6.5. My noon was low. My afternoon and night were within range, not great to be honest, but then the sum total, which is what Evan was just referring to, was 8.3, which is high, right? So I was in that acute phase. Now comparing it to the one that I did this year, most of mine are within range, with the exception of my afternoon and night. They're a little bit low. So I was in the compensatory phase. Now, can you see that graph?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, fantastic. So this green bar here is literally like, this is perfect. Okay, this is our FDN range. So test 1 is this blue line here. You can see I was so high, I wasn't even off the chart. You can see it tanks down, and then I'm flatlining. So the most recent one is obviously a little bit better. That's the light blue one here. There's still this massive drop off here, which isn't ideal. And it is a little bit flatter than I would like to see here. But this is where FDN really comes into its own, because if I looked at this test result and based on me being in the compensatory range, I'd be like, oh, okay, this isn't good. But if I'm being honest, I took the test out of curiosity to see where I was. I'm not really having any symptoms. So going back to the phases, although on this sheet I'm listed as a compensatory phase, I'm actually I'm feeling pretty good. I'm fairly healthy. I don't have any kind of major complaints or anything. So I would actually say I'm more on the homeostasis side of things. Obviously, we want to keep an eye on that, and I'm open to being wrong. But overall, my health and my test results are pretty good. I am dealing with some leaky gut as we go down. I'll show you the effects of that. But I've been doing FDN for a couple of years, and sadly, I was even doing FDN before this first test. The first SHP I took was by a company called Access, who we don't use anymore. So it's hard to compare because this test has been set up specifically for the lab that we do the sex hormone panel with now, which is Fluids IQ. But this is the first Fluids IQ one that I did. And my results, even after doing FDN for quite some time, they're still not great. And I think it's really important to share that with you guys, because I think a lot of the time, especially with clients and our own health, we go into this and you think, okay, great, I'm I'm going to do the FDN course. And, the average for that is 7 months, Ev? Is it 7
It's
months?
actually about 8.5 now, believe it or
Eight
not.
and a half. So you get that idea, okay, I'm going to be better after 8.5 months. And it doesn't always work like that, because you have to remember the years that it has taken you to get to the point that you're at. So I'm sharing this with you today because, there's still work for me to be doing. And although I would say on a day-to-day basis, I am now pretty healthy, and especially compared to what I was, I came to FDN having panic attacks all the time. I had a chronic panic disorder, and I had generalized anxiety disorder. And if you've listened to the podcast before, you'll have heard me share my story about that. Part of the reason why I was in the acute phase and came to FDN. We don't hear that a lot, but I think because I had such prominent symptoms that I was very, very aware of, having 4 panic attacks a day, I knew I needed to do something. So you can see here, my DHEA was pretty low, 0.5, and it is now in a good range at 3.09. The some cortisol and the DHEA range. So here you can see how hugely off it was. So this means that I was very, very cortisol dominant, which basically cortisol is very it's a catabolic hormone. Okay, so when we are cortisol dominant, your body is basically in fight or flight. Cortisol and being cortisol dominant means your body it's in that tear down phase all the time. It's tearing down excuse me, for that quick energy. And now I've kind of slid a bit too much the other way. I'm now more DHEA dominant. So obviously that's something that I'm going to work on. I'm not overly worried about it because you can see here I'm just below FDN preferred range. It's just something to be aware of. I'm not particularly having any symptoms right now. But again, it's good to know where you're at.
Right.
So my estradiol used to be a 6.4. So it has got a little bit low at a 3.8. So again, something to be aware of. What is most astounding to me is how low my progesterone was. It was at a 70. And you can see here the minimum is 2.15.9. So now I'm pretty good. I'm around the middle of that range. So I'm very, very happy with that. And we haven't. They're still working on the ratio for this, so that there's no markers for that right now. But it's a lot better than it used to be. That's for sure. And finally, we're going to come down to my testosterone. Or not finally, but you can see again how low testosterone was compared to what it is now. My melatonin's been pretty good. It's a little bit lower than it used to be, but I'm not particularly worried. Now, this is interesting. My SIG-A is very, very high. The one thing I will say, it looks like it was high the last time I did this as well. SIG-A is our immune system, basically. And it does change very, very quickly. I've actually spoken to the clinical advisors about this because I was a little bit worried when I saw this. But secretory IgA is the most abundant immunoglobulin we have in our system, and it changes very, very quickly. So my body could have been fighting a cold or something like that. And as I mentioned before, I do still have leaky gut. So it's something that I am working on, and it could have been related to that. So you can see that overall, my test results are looking a lot better than they used to, especially when we come up here to the cortisol, which was obviously sky high to begin with. I used to have a lot of morning panic attacks. So that explains that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I love how you had the test comparison worksheet too. I don't have that admittedly for today.
I thought it would just do good for people to see the visual.
Well, and it's what we use, so fair enough. I have some results for you folks as well, so not to confuse you with tests here, but these are all fundamentally the same tests. We basically just went through a few variations. BioHealth, as you can see on the screen now, this was used forever. And then what we had to do is switch it up a couple of times before we found our current home with, what do you call it?
Fluids
IQ. Thank you. So yeah, this was actually back. This is nuts to look at, man. This is because it's just back in 2017. I can't believe I've been doing this long. So yeah, I ran my test back in May of 2017, as you can see at the top there, and now it is freaking 2024. So when I ran this, and I'll zoom in. Let me see if I can do that. There we go. I'll zoom in a little bit here. And then
Perfect.
Unfortunately, once I zoom in, I can't move it that much. I think that's good enough. So this was a early stage exhaustive phase test result. And what's crazy is I was 21 years old at the time. And so this is coming off of, mind you, as Lucy relates to very all too well, years of panic attacks, panic disorder, generalized anxiety for probably 15 years at that point, major diagnoses, making terrible decisions with drugs and alcohol for my mental health stuff. So getting in trouble, getting kicked out of school, just wild stress for stuff. And then to top it all off, this was not too long after coming back from California, which is where I found FDN. But when I was out there to support ourselves, we had like no money at the time, my friend and I. So we were working all the time doing food delivery, like Postmates. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that. It's kind of like Uber Eats, except that's all they do is just deliver. And so he would go out and do that during the day. I was still learning about health, so don't judge me. I'm like, oh, well, I love the night stuff. I'll do night shift for this. And that just killed my body. So I ran that not too long after all of that and years of stress with stuff. So this is where I was at. The morning result, as you can see, I was still able to put out just fine for that. I mean, the reference range is 13 to 24. I was 19.7. It's perfect. But as soon as the morning was done, and trust me, I felt this physically, I definitely could feel this. The rest of my day was just shot. It was like by the time I got to noon and in the afternoon, my body had nothing left to keep up with all this stuff. And I felt it. I remember I came back and I was working at my parents' restaurant and I'd be like in the office for a second to take a break. And I literally, with a busy restaurant, I think they sat, it was only like 52 people, but busy for us would be like 45, 50 people then. We'd have that out there. I'm taking a break in the back while everyone else is doing their stuff. And I mean, I'm ready to sleep. I could have fallen asleep on those desks. So it's very scary at the time when you're dealing with this stuff. Now, this is also something to note because it's interesting. The way that the body or each individual body can handle things can be actually quite unique. I've also noticed personally a correlation between the younger the person is and the stuff I'm about to show you. So normally what one would expect is if the cortisol sum is very low, you would expect DHEA to be low as well. Now, Reed actually says this in the course. I remember this from 7 years ago because it was relevant to me at the time. He said about 10% of people that he ran tests on will come back for whatever reason with high DHEA, even though they have the low cortisol. And I don't know if he would agree with this. I've never talked to him about it, but I have personally noticed that correlation. It seems to be overrepresented in younger people. So I would say, and I mean very young people, like anyone sub maybe like 28, 29, 30, that seems to be the case. And I don't know why that is. I'm not saying it's exclusive to that age range either. It just seems to be overrepresented. And I kind of wonder, is it like, does cortisol almost get tanked out first and the body compensates in these other areas? I don't know. But nonetheless, my DHEA, you would expect it to be low here. It's not low at all. It's actually high. The reference range is a 2 to 10. I'm sitting at an 18. So it makes for a very weird cortisol to DHEA ratio. And I won't show you all the results on the other test, mostly because I don't have them. And it's not actually relevant because most of them are pretty good. So that's a good problem to have. But I wanted to show you guys this test in a little more depth because it's really crazy what was starting to happen here with some of the stuff. So it just goes to show what the body can do. Like, let's look at progesterone, for example. Progesterone, by any sense, is considered more of a female sex hormone. And the male physiological range the male range is supposed to be 5 to 100. The physiological range is 100 to 500. Females, I'm sitting at a 433. So for those listening on audio, that's not, I didn't say that wrong. The male reference range was a 5 to 100, and I was over 4 times higher than the highest end of the reference range. Now, here's the thing. You might not always be able to figure out the exact answers to this stuff. And that's why we don't treat the paperwork. We just make clinical correlations and we look at things. Because still to this day, I can only guess as to why that would have happened. And I remember, God bless him, you know Brandon Millay pretty well, right? Lucy from Friday
Yeah.
Hours, I guess. Okay. So Brandon Millay is a very nice guy and he's very humble and he is he's not blunt, so he's not going to be rude to you. And I remember him trying to beat around the bush, more or less asking if I had an older girlfriend. Let's put it that way. So someone probably double my age. And of course, I don't know where he's going with this at first. And it was throwing me off. And he said, this guy's so smart because as funny as it is, it was really an astute observation and question.
For
Because he
sure.
said, if you're, dating someone in their 40s and 50s and they have progesterone cream that they rub on their hands and their arms, and they were to touch you, then that can actually go through your skin and could artificially raise the results. I'm like, wow. So again, very weird and funny on one hand, but like really interesting that this guy was even thinking like that, and had the brain power to do that. I just thought that was cool. So thank God, no, that was not the case. I know every 20-year-old guy maybe wants that at one point. I didn't pull that off. So here we are. I don't know why the progesterone was super high. For me, I think the bottom line was, knowing what I know now, is I came across some research later that showed if you have fungal overgrowth, specifically things like candida, and I had been on 20 courses of antibiotics in my life before the age of 18, that could raise progesterone, because progesterone could actually act as a protectant, I guess, against some of those things. So I thought that was really interesting. Again, it's a theory. I don't know, but interesting. Melatonin's basically shot. It was 12.9. The reference range is 12 to 35. That's not what you want, so no good there. Testosterone's 98, which is awesome because the reference range is 40 to 130. But we already know that males in my generation are trending on the lower side as it is. Like some studies show it's 50% less than our grandfathers, 50% less testosterone. So on a side note, something to think about if you're dealing with fertility issues, it's not just a female problem. It's usually both. Both of them usually have things to work on. So all this stuff's going on. But I just wanted to show you this to show you could have this low cortisol, but the progesterone's super high. The DHEA is super high. This is fairly unique test results. I've never really come across ones that were similar to mine. And I've had plenty of other clients that I hadn't had anyone else similar to theirs. So this is why we don't treat the paperwork. The paperwork's different a lot of the times. There's patterns, but a lot of the times it's different. And so you need to make the clinical correlation and be able to act accordingly, right? Like if, gosh forbid, I did have some older girlfriend at that time, well, there's the correlation, right? There's nothing to really do there. It's make sure she stops using progesterone cream before you're hooking up with her, I guess. So, holy crap, the things we get into on this podcast. I'm going to share this one real quick and switch over to my tab here for my better test results. And this is pretty cool. I'll do this one a little faster. So as you can see, this is a different lab, but it's fundamentally the same thing. So I was so happy when I got this back because it showed that the work I was doing worked. And this was this particular test result actually might have been a couple of years later, to be very clear. I don't want to say this was like the year after. So I didn't end up doing it. I did not have a lot of money when I first graduated. So I should have prioritized this, but I made a lot of excuses as to why I couldn't do that. But anyway, I got these test results back, and thank God this is where I was at. So for those on audio, basically my morning cortisol is just over the range for being almost a little too high. It's in the yellow, so you kind of have like a warning, if you will. My noon marker, perfect. Evening marker, perfect. Nighttime, little lower than you might have expected. But overall, nothing to complain about. When you're coming from the exhaustive phase, if anything, this would be looked at as maybe a mild acute, or even like very, very far end compensatory. I'd probably call it mild acute if I saw it on someone's test results. I'd have to add up everything properly, but that's really what it is. And I still have a theory to this day as to why the morning one was even high. So I took this when I've told you about this before, Lucy. We didn't know each other at the time, but when I was doing that 60-day camping experiment. Now, one of the things that we know is when people expose themselves to morning light, that light can help trigger ACTH, and then that is a precursor for cortisol. So that's adrenocorticotropic releasing hormone. And I kind of sometimes wonder, well, if these reference ranges and samples are taken off the general population, how many people in the general population spend the first 2 hours of their morning outside in the sun, without sunglasses, without contacts, without prescription glasses? Less than 5%. And if they are, they're not even doing it intentionally, right? So it maybe they're a landscaper or a construction worker or whatever. But I sometimes wonder, is the reference range off? And maybe this is a healthy cortisol release given the circumstances. I don't know. I also know I was nervous out there sometimes because I was doing it at my parents' house because they have like 3 acres that's surrounded by farmland. And, you hear some critters wandering around at night. So maybe I woke up with a little more cortisol than I should have. So regardless, imagine my feelings at the time when I get these results back, considering where I was at. It's like, wow, okay, this stuff's working. This is actually working the way that it's supposed to. So it's proof that the body can heal, man. And I'm probably due for another test soon, so I'll get that checked out. But Yeah, those are the before and afters for both Lucy and I. I'm trying to think if we got Tracy laughing in the chat. So good. I'm glad my jokes landed with someone. I think we covered a lot of the main stuff, and man, it's
Yeah.
amazing. Somehow we're 35 minutes in already. So, we wanted to show you guys this today to show that it works. It works differently for everyone. It can
Yeah.
take different amounts of times, but if you do the system as you're supposed to, then this can get better. This is not like an ultimatum for you. It's not all doom and gloom. Most people that go through FDN are probably not going to be in love with their test results when they first get them back, just because there's a lot going on. But I would say that there's hope for all this, and the system works. So that's my final thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I would say, when I got my first test results back, I felt so validated because I finally felt like I had something to work towards, something concrete. Like this whatever as evidence. It was proof that it wasn't just me. It wasn't all in my head. I wasn't losing my mind. My body was struggling, and that's why I was dealing with what I was dealing with the panic attacks, with the anxiety, and all the other things that kind of came along with that. And it gave me something to work toward. And yeah, absolutely, it was hard. It was really hard. My first protocol was really hard, but I did it, and I have healed so much because of what I went through. And I'm just FDN changed my life. It sounds so cheesy, but it is the God's honest truth. I would never regret going through the course.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lucy. I think Lucy and I still need to talk in the background, but continuing this series here of kind of going through some of the foundational labs with you, what should be probably next in line here is our mucosal barrier assessment. So we'll do our intro lesson and then the test results. And the intro lesson will all be around the mucosal barrier and leaky gut and the things that are associated with it. So definitely do not miss that one. I think you're out next week for this, right?
Yes, I'm away next week.
Okay, so we might be doing that one in 2 weeks from now. But remember, we do this every Tuesday. And if you've missed ones from before, go on our YouTube channel. We have them under the Lives tab, or you can always check out our podcast anywhere that you listen to podcasts, and you can listen to the audio only version. So thank you so much for being a part of this today. And Lucy, it is always fun talking.